First contact in the void. Nova Station hung like a gleaming spider's web against the backdrop of the Andromeda Rift, its crystalline spires catching starlight in impossible patterns. Diplomatic liaison Darius Walsh stood at the viewport of his newly assigned quarters, taking in the sight of the massive structure that would be his home for the foreseeable future. The station's unique architecture, a blend of 7 different species engineering principles, still managed to take his breath away, even after 15 years of deep space assignments. Liaison Walsh, the station's AI chimed softly, your presence is requested in the observation ring. Priority level moderate. Darius straightened his formal diplomatic vest, checking his reflection in the viewport. At 43, his dark skin had few wrinkles, though silver threaded through his close-cropped hair. Nature of the request. Unspecified. However, Station Security Chief Calthier personally issued the summons. That was unusual. The Meridian Security Chief rarely dealt directly with human diplomats. Tell him I'm on my way. The observation ring curved through the upper levels of Nova Station, its transparent walls offering an unobstructed view of space. As Darius approached, he noticed something odd. The usually bustling area was almost empty. The few beings present hugged the walls, their attention fixed on a solitary figure standing at the far end of the ring. She stood perfectly still, her form draped in flowing robes that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. What caught Darius's attention wasn't her unusual attire, but the way everyone maintained a precise distance from her, as if an invisible barrier existed. Chief Calthier intercepted Darius before he could get closer. The Meridian's crystalline exoskeleton clicked softly as he moved. Liaison Walsh, thank you for coming quickly. What's the situation? That, Calthier gestured toward the solitary figure, is Vexara. She arrived on the station 3 standard days ago. We've had incidents. Incidents? Anyone who comes within 2 meters of her experiences severe neural feedback. 2 security officers are still in medical recovery. She claims no control over this effect. Darius studied the figure more carefully. Has she been hostile? No, but her presence is causing considerable distress among the station's population. We've tried to convince her to leave, but she insists she must speak with a human representative. Specifically. Why wasn't I informed sooner? You only arrived yesterday. We were attempting to handle the situation internally. Calthier's crystalline features shifted in what Darius recognized as discomfort. We've exhausted our options. Darius nodded slowly. And now you want me to talk to her? With extreme caution. Do not approach closer than 3 meters. Ignoring the warning, Darius began walking toward the solitary figure. As he drew closer, he could see that her robes weren't simply black. They shifted with subtle patterns like oil on water. She turned to face him, and Darius felt his breath catch. Her features were humanoid but clearly alien. Her skin had a subtle iridescence, and her eyes were entirely silver with no visible pupils. Intricate markings traced paths across her face, glowing faintly with an inner light. You are human, she said. Her voice carried an unusual harmonic, as if multiple tones spoke at once. Diplomatic liaison Darius Walsh, he confirmed, stopping at what he judged to be about 3 meters distance. I understand you've been asking for a human representative. Closer, she said simply. Behind him, Darius heard Calthier's warning click. He ignored it and took another step forward, then another. At 2 meters, he felt it, a subtle pressure against his skin, like static electricity before a storm. You should be in pain, Vexara said, her head tilting slightly. All the others. Darius took another step. The pressure increased, but it wasn't painful, more like stepping into a strong wind. I'm not all the others. For the first time, her expression showed something other than careful neutrality, surprise, tinged with what might have been hope. She lifted her hand, palm outward, stopping just short of touching him. The resonance should be unbearable at this distance. Darius looked at her hand, then back to her silver eyes. Years of diplomatic training screamed at him to be cautious, to step back, to follow security protocols. Instead, he slowly raised his own hand and pressed his palm against hers. The contact sent a shock through him, not pain, but something deeper, like a tuning fork struck against his bones. Around them, he heard gasps and warnings shouted in multiple languages. But Vexara's expression had transformed completely, wonder replacing caution. "Impossible," she whispered, unless the legends were true." "What legends?" Before she could answer, alarms began blaring throughout the station. Red emergency lights pulsed along the corridors, and the station's AI voice took on an urgent tone. "Security containment protocol initiated. All civilians clear the observation ring immediately." Vexara's hand gripped his more tightly. "They don't understand. None of them understand what this means." "Then help me understand," Darius said, even as he heard the heavy footsteps of security forces approaching from both directions. "Your people humans, you're the missing link, the key we've been searching for across 12 generations." Her silver eyes seemed to pierce right through him. "And now they'll try to separate us before I can explain why." Darius made a split-second decision that would either end his diplomatic career or change the course of interstellar relations forever. He kept his grip on Vexara's hand and smiled. "Then I suggest we find somewhere quieter to talk." The security forces were closing in, but Darius had spent 15 years studying Nova Station's layout. He knew every maintenance corridor, every service tunnel, every unofficial shortcut. As alarms blared and orders were shouted, he tugged Vexara toward a hidden access panel, knowing that whatever came next would be unlike anything in his diplomatic training. The mysteries of her condition, the legends she spoke of, and the reason only he could touch her would have to wait. For now, they ran, while behind them, Nova Station erupted into chaos. The bridge between worlds. The maintenance tunnels of Nova Station hummed with the pulse of power conduits, casting everything in a shifting blue glow. Darius led Vexara through the narrow passages, his hand still linked with hers. The resonance between them had settled into a steady vibration, like a distant song just below the threshold of hearing. "You know your way through these passages well," Vexara observed as they descended another level. Her robes seemed to absorb the ambient light, making her appear as a moving shadow. "Part of the job," Darius replied, pausing at an intersection. "When you're a diplomat, knowing the back ways is as important as knowing the official channels." He tapped a sequence into a maintenance panel, and a hidden door slid open. "This leads to an old observation pod. It's been offline for years, perfect for a private conversation." The pod was small, barely 4 meters across, but its curved walls were completely transparent, offering a stunning view of the star field and the massive structure of Nova Station above them. Vexara moved to the center of the room, her silver eyes reflecting the starlight. "Now," Darius said, settling against the wall, "about those legends you mentioned." Vexara's markings pulsed softly as she gathered her thoughts. "My people, the Nexari, were once part of a vast coalition of species. This was long ago, before the Great Silence, before the barriers between worlds grew so rigid. We were researchers, seekers of knowledge about the fundamental forces that bind reality together." "And something went wrong," Darius guessed. "Something went very wrong." She raised her hand, and the air around it seemed to ripple. "We discovered what we called the resonance, a field of energy that exists in the space between conventional physics. We thought we could use it to bridge the gaps between species, to create perfect understanding." A distant boom echoed through the station, and emergency lights flashed in the corridors above. They were still searching. Darius pushed away from the wall, moving closer to Vexara. What happened instead? The field became unstable. Those affected by it became living conduits, generating feedback that drove others away. Entire populations had to be quarantined. The coalition fractured, knowledge was lost, and those like me, she gestured to herself. We became living reminders of that failure. "But humans are different," Darius said, understanding beginning to dawn. "We can touch you without experiencing the feedback." "Not all humans," Vexara corrected. "Just some, those with a specific genetic marker, one that matches fragments we've found in ancient records. records that suggest humans weren't just another species that evolved independently. The implications hit Darius like a physical force. You're saying we're connected to your people somehow, that humans are. The missing piece, Vexara finished. A species engineered by the Coalition designed to be immune to the resonance. But something happened, a catastrophe, a war we don't know. Your people were lost, your true origins forgotten. Before Darius could process this revelation, the pod's entrance hissed open. Chief Calthier stood in the doorway, flanked by security officers in full containment gear. "Step away from her, Liaison Walsh." "Chief, this isn't what you think," Darius started, but Calthier cut him off. "What I think is that an unauthorized alien entity has compromised a human diplomatic officer. Station protocols are clear." "Your protocols are based on fear," Vexara said, her voice carrying that strange, multi-toned quality again. "Fear of what you don't understand." "Understanding isn't required for containment," Calthier replied. The security officers raised their weapons, not lethal armaments, but heavy stun projectors. Darius moved to stand between them and Vexara. "Chief, she has information vital to human history, to the history of all our species. You can't just—" The rest of his sentence was cut off as the station's lights suddenly went dead. Emergency power kicked in, but something was wrong. The usual blue emergency lighting had been replaced by a deep, pulsing purple that seemed to come from the station's walls themselves. "No," Vexara whispered, her markings flaring bright. "They're waking up." "What's waking up?" Darius demanded, but he could already see patterns of light racing through the station's structure, similar to the markings on Vexara's skin, but on a massive scale. "The resonance protocols," she said, her voice tight with fear. "The station, it's old, far older than any of you know. Part of it was built on the ruins of a Coalition outpost. And now—" A sound filled the air, not heard with ears but felt in bones and teeth, a rising harmonic that made the security officers stagger back. Calthier's crystalline form actually cracked slightly, hairline fractures appearing across his surface. "We have to shut it down," Vexara said urgently, gripping Darius's arm. "If the protocols fully activate, they'll try to cure everyone on the station by force. The feedback will drive them mad or worse." Darius looked at the chaos unfolding around them, the security team retreating in pain, Calthier ordering an emergency evacuation, and above it all, the strange lights spreading like infection through Nova Station systems. He'd wanted answers about humanity's past, about Vexara's nature. Now it seemed those answers might come at a terrible price. "Tell me what we need to do," he said, tightening his grip on her hand as the harmonic rose to a fever pitch. Around them, Nova Station shuddered as ancient systems, dormant for millennia, began to wake. Echoes of the past. The purple light pulsing through Nova Station's corridors grew stronger, casting wild shadows as Darius and Vexara raced through maintenance tunnels. The harmonic resonance had risen to a pitch that made every metallic surface vibrate, and distant screams echoed through the station's communication systems. "The central core," Vexara said, her markings flaring brighter with each surge of energy. "That's where the original Coalition systems would have been integrated. We have to reach it." Darius ducked under a sparking power conduit. "Slight problem, the core is restricted to senior engineering staff only. The security systems are already compromised," Vexara finished. "Look." She was right. The station's usually impenetrable security barriers were flickering, ancient symbols bleeding through their modern displays. Whatever was awakening in the station's systems was older and more fundamental than current security protocols. They rounded a corner and nearly collided with a group of station residents fleeing in the opposite direction. A Hellion merchant, his crystalline form clouded with stress, recognized Darius. "Liaison, the station's gone mad. Every system is broadcasting some kind of signal. Beings are collapsing, seeing things." "Get to the evacuation pods," Darius ordered, falling into his diplomatic role. "Security forces will guide you to safe zones." He hoped that was still true. As the group hurried past, carefully avoiding Vexara, she touched the wall. The patterns in her skin synchronized with the pulsing lights for a moment. The resonance is spreading. The station's original programming is trying to fix what it sees as genetic corruption, by forcibly altering everyone on board. The Coalition's final solution, she said bitterly. They thought they could correct the resonance's effects by rewriting the genetic codes of affected populations. They didn't understand that consciousness itself had been changed. They reached a maintenance shaft that dropped straight down toward the station's core. Darius grabbed a service ladder. How long do we have? Minutes, maybe, once the process begins. She didn't need to finish. The screams echoing through the station were growing more numerous. They descended rapidly, the air growing thicker with energy. At the bottom of the shaft, they found themselves in a vast circular chamber, Nova Station's central core. But it wasn't the pristine engineering hub Darius remembered from station schematics. The modern control panels and power regulators had been pushed aside by something else, something growing from within the station itself. Crystalline structures burst through the floor and walls, pulsing with the same purple light that now filled the station. They formed patterns, no more than patterns. Language, equations, history written in light and crystal. By all the stars, Vexara breathed, it's a Genesis engine. They what? The device used to create your species. She moved forward, her robes flowing like liquid shadow. The Coalition didn't just engineer humans, they grew you, evolved you in accelerated time, shaped by the very forces they were trying to control. Darius stared at the crystalline growths, seeing familiar shapes in their alien geometry, double helixes, molecular structures, fragments of human DNA rendered in light. Why? Why create an entire species? Because they needed a bridge. A new voice spoke, not from a person, but from the station itself. A figure formed in the center of the chamber, composed of pure energy and crystalline shards. It was humanoid, but only in the way that a child's drawing might capture the basic shape of a person. Vexara stepped forward. You're an archive intelligence, the Coalition's keeper of knowledge. I am what remains, the figure agreed. When the Coalition fell, when the resonance threatened to tear reality apart, I was sealed away, waiting, watching through the millennia as their last creation, humanity, grew and evolved naturally. And now what? Darius demanded. You're going to forcibly evolve everyone on this station. The protocols demand correction. The figure's voice was neither cruel nor kind, simply certain. The species must be brought into alignment. The bridge must be completed. You'll kill them, Vexara said. Their minds aren't ready for this kind of transformation. Even if their bodies survive, their consciousness will shatter. The figure turned its featureless face toward her. You carry the pure strain of the resonance. You understand the necessity of unity. I understand that forcing change only brings destruction. She grabbed Darius's hand, and their combined resonance made the crystals around them sing. Look, this is what true unity looks like, chosen, not forced. Evolution through understanding, not compulsion. The archive intelligence studied them, its form flickering. This was not in the protocols. The bridge species was not meant to achieve harmony so soon. Your protocols are wrong, Darius said. They were wrong when they broke the Coalition, they were wrong when they forced my species into existence, and they're wrong now. Shut them down. I cannot, the protocols are fundamental. They cannot be changed, only completed. Vexara's markings suddenly flared brilliant white. Or overwritten, she turned to Darius. The resonance you share with me, it's not just compatibility. It's an evolution of the original force, something new, something the protocols don't recognize. What are you suggesting? A counterforce, she said. If we combine our resonance fields at full strength right here at the core. It could destroy you both, the archive intelligence warned. Darius looked at Vexara, then at the pools and crystals that held the secret of humanity's origins. Above them, Nova Station shuddered as the ancient protocols continued their work. They were out of time, out of options, and the screams were getting closer. How do we do this? He asked. Vexara's silver eyes met his. We let go of everything we thought we knew, we trust. We become the bridge we were meant to be. She held out both hands, and Darius took them without hesitation. The resonance between them built immediately, harmonics layering upon harmonics. The archive intelligence's form became agitated, the crystals around them vibrating at increasing frequencies. Warning, it announced. Unknown protocol interaction detected. Containment recommended. Containment. Containment. But Darius and Vexara weren't listening anymore. They were falling into the resonance into each other, into something vast and new and impossible. The last thing Darius heard before the light took him was the sound of crystals beginning to shatter, and in that sound was either an ending or a beginning, or perhaps, somehow, both at once. The price of truth. Light shattered, reality twisted. Then, like a wave crashing back from shore, everything snapped into focus. Darius found himself on his knees in Nova Station's central core, his entire body humming with residual energy. Beside him, Vexara knelt, her markings pulsing with a new rhythm no longer just blue, but shot through with threads of gold. The crystalline growths that had consumed the chamber were different now. Instead of their previous aggressive expansion, they had transformed into delicate lattices that traced complex patterns through the air. The hostile purple light had been replaced by a softer, more natural glow. The protocols, Darius managed, his voice rough. Did we stop them? The archive intelligence's form flickered back into existence, but changed. Its rigid geometric patterns had been replaced by flowing lines that seemed almost organic. You did more than stop them. You rewrote them. Vexara stood shakily, helping Darius to his feet. The resonance between them had shifted, no longer a discordant force, but something harmonious, controlled. How many casualties? Station-wide medical emergency reports indicate 17 severe cases of resonance exposure, 142 minor cases, the intelligence reported. No fatalities. The protocol interruption came in time. Darius let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Then the chamber's door slid open, admitting Chief Calthier and a team of engineers. The Meridian Security Chief's crystalline form had healed from its earlier damage, but his movements were cautious. The station's systems are stabilizing, Calthier announced, then focused on Darius and Vexara. Though I suspect someone has significant explaining to do. Chief, Darius started, but Vexara stepped forward. The explanation you seek goes far beyond station security protocols, she said. It involves the true history of multiple species, including humanity, and now, she gestured to the transformed core chamber. We have proof. The archive intelligence's form expanded, projecting images into the air star maps, genetic sequences, historical records. The Coalition's great experiment did not end in failure, as was long believed. It ended in transformation. What we witnessed here was the completion of a cycle begun millennia ago. Calthier's crystalline features shifted in what Darius recognized as deep concern. You're saying this station, all this time, was built on the remains of something far older, Darius confirmed. Something that connected to humanity's origins, and now that connection is active again. One of the engineers, a Hellion named Varix, moved closer to study the transformed crystals. These energy patterns, they're unlike anything in our records. The potential applications should be approached with far more caution than before, Vexara said firmly. The Coalition's mistake was trying to force evolution, to control forces they didn't fully understand. We have a chance to do better. The chamber hummed with new energy as more station officials arrived, medical teams, science officers, diplomatic representatives. Darius watched as Vexara began explaining the situation to them, her silver eyes bright with purpose. The fear that had surrounded her was gone, replaced by cautious fascination. Liaison Walsh, Calthier said quietly, the station council will want a full report. This discovery, it changes everything we thought we knew about human origins, about the nature of space itself. It changes more than that, Darius replied, watching as Vexara demonstrated the controlled resonance field to a group of wide-eyed scientists. It changes what we thought was possible between species. The archive intelligence's form shifted, addressing the growing crowd. The protocols were designed to force unity through transformation. They failed because true unity cannot be compelled, it must be chosen, as these two have demonstrated. The bridge between worlds was never meant to be a structure or a process. It was meant to be a choice. Darius felt Vexara's hand slip into his, their combined resonance creating subtle harmonics in the chamber's crystals. Above them, Nova Station systems continued to realign, ancient technology merging with modern innovations in ways that would keep engineers and scientists busy for decades. But there was something more immediate to deal with. The station's communication systems were lighting up with incoming messages, ships from dozens of worlds responding to the energy surge they'd detected. Everyone would want answers. The Earth government, the Meridian Consortium, the Hellion Republic, and countless others. "They're afraid," Vexara said softly, watching the incoming transmissions multiply. "They don't understand what's happened here." "Then we'll help them understand," Darius replied. "Not through force, not through protocols, but through choice, the way it should have been from the beginning." The Archive Intelligence's form flickered. A new protocol is establishing itself, one based on voluntary connection rather than enforced unity. The implications are unprecedented. Calthier made a sound that might have been a laugh. "Unprecedented seems to be becoming normal around here." He turned to Darius and Vexara. "The council chamber is prepared. I believe you both have a story to tell." As they left the transformed core, Darius caught glimpses of station residents returning to their quarters, engineers already beginning to study the changed systems, medical teams treating those affected by the resonance surge. The fear was still there, but now it was mixed with something else: hope, understanding, possibility. The ancient protocols had tried to force evolution. Instead, they had witnessed revolution, not of systems or species, but of understanding itself. As they walked toward the council chamber, Darius realized that the real work was just beginning. Building bridges was always harder than forcing connections, but it was the only way forward that mattered. The station hummed around them, its song changed but unbroken, ready for whatever came next. Breaking barriers. 3 days after the transformation of Nova Station's core, the Grand Council chamber was filled to capacity. Representatives from 27 species had arrived, drawn by news of what many were already calling the Resonance Revolution. Darius stood at the chamber's center with Vexara, watching as the latest group of diplomats filed in a delegation of quantum archivists, their forms shifting between states of matter as they moved. "Nervous?" Vexara asked, her markings glowing softly in the chamber's dim light. "Terrified," Darius admitted. "We're about to rewrite several species' understanding of their own history. That rarely goes smoothly." The Archive Intelligence had spent the past days compiling its records, presenting an unassailable chain of evidence about humanity's engineered origins and the true purpose of the Coalition's experiments. Now that truth was about to be shared with the wider galaxy. Chief Calthier stepped forward to call the session to order, his crystalline form catching the light. "Representatives of the gathered species, we are here to witness testimony regarding events that have transformed our understanding of galactic history. Before we begin, a demonstration has been requested." Darius nodded to Vexara. Together, they activated their combined resonance field. The chamber's newly transformed crystals responded, creating a harmonic display of light and sound that rippled through the air. Several delegates leaned forward in fascination. Others drew back in instinctive caution. "What you are witnessing," Vexara explained, "is not the forced unity that the Coalition sought to create. This is willing synchronization, the bridge between species that was always meant to exist." The Archive Intelligence manifested in the chamber's center, its form now a fluid blend of geometric and organic patterns. The historical records are clear. Humanity was created as part of the Coalition's attempt to control the forces of reality itself. But in doing so, they accidentally created something far more valuable, a species capable of genuine adaptation and connection. Murmurs swept through the chamber. A Meridian elder rose. "You expect us to accept that one of the dominant species in known space was artificially created, the political implications alone." are less important than the practical applications, interrupted Varix, the Hellion engineer who had been studying the transformed core. She projected a series of readings into the air. The controlled resonance field has already shown potential in everything from faster-than-light communications to healing applications. This discovery transcends politics. Nothing transcends politics, rumbled a quantum archivist. If humanity possesses this inherent ability to bridge species barriers, it gives them an unprecedented advantage in helping, Darius cut in firmly. In healing the divisions that have kept our species separate for millennia. This isn't about advantage, it's about understanding. Vexara stepped forward, her silver eyes scanning the chamber. My people lived in isolation for generations, feared because we carried the pure strain of the resonance. We thought it was a curse. Now we know it was only waiting for the right connection. She gestured to the transformed crystals. Look at what happens when we stop trying to force unity and start choosing it instead. The chamber erupted in overlapping discussions, theories, and arguments. But something was different from the usual diplomatic chaos. The resonance field was still active, creating subtle harmonics that seemed to facilitate understanding even between traditionally hostile species. The archive intelligence's form expanded, filling the chamber with images of the Coalition's final days. The protocols were designed to prevent another collapse, another war. But they were based on fear of difference, fear of change, fear of losing control. What happened in Nova Station's core showed us another way. The bridge between species was never meant to be a single connection, Darius added. It was meant to be a choice we all make, again and again, to reach across the barriers we've built. A young Hellion diplomat raised her crystalline hand. But how can we be sure this new resonance won't become as dangerous as the old? How can we trust that this power won't be misused? Because this time, Vexara said, we're not hiding the truth, we're not forcing change. We're offering understanding and letting each species, each individual choose whether to accept it. Darius felt the ripple of response through the chamber, not just in words or gestures, but in the subtle harmonics that now seemed to permeate Nova Station itself. The transformed core had changed more than just systems and protocols. It had changed possibility itself. We stand at a crossroads, the archive intelligence announced. The Coalition's great experiment did not end in failure or success. It ended in choice. Now each of you must choose how to move forward with this knowledge. One by one, representatives began to step forward, not with declarations of policy or demands for control, but with questions. Real questions, asked in the spirit of genuine curiosity. The fear was still there, but it no longer dominated. As the session continued, Darius looked at Vexara, remembering that first moment when he'd ignored warnings and protocol to reach out to her. One choice, made without knowing its implications, had unleashed something ancient and new into the galaxy. The station hummed around them, its transformed systems a testament to what was possible when barriers were broken not by force, but by understanding. Above them, ships from dozens of worlds hung in space, their crews watching and waiting to see what would emerge from this revelation. Ready for what comes next? Vexara asked softly. Darius smiled, feeling the resonance between them pulse with possibility. As long as it's a choice, he said, I'm ready for anything. The chamber filled with discussion, debate, and discovery as the gathered species began the long process of understanding their new reality. But through it all, the harmonics remained, a subtle reminder that the greatest bridges were not built of steel or stone or protocol, but of willing hearts reaching across the void to connect.